Hello, my beautiful people, and welcome to the first episode of Valkyrie Sessions. If you are tuning in on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, regardless, we appreciate you tuning in. My name's Aaron Jackson, and yes, you are listening to Valkyrie Sessions. And what this is going to be is a podcast dedicated solely to a woman in rock, metalcore scene, talking about all of the incredible things going on with that. I know there's other podcasts out there that talk about this same thing. Shout out to She's with the Band and Metal Queens podcast, and I know there's plenty of others. The one thing we're going to add to this podcast a little bit is I have basically a dream, and one of the reasons that I'm doing this podcast is it is a goal of mine as a person who is a huge fan of rock and metal, to create a festival. I think that right now is a really important time in the world, and I think that it's a time where you're starting to see where, for example, in things like sports with the WNBA, but also many other things, and rock and metal being one of them, the growth of female music out there, the growth of just females in positions of strength and power, and I think that's a great thing, and I think that you're starting to see that with a lot more. And I'll talk about the specifics of this in a little bit, but for lack of a better term, female-fronted metal, rock, metalcore groups, even groups that have incredible female guitarists or drummers. The Warning I know is an all-female band, and they have great guitarists and drummers. But I've also like Jen Ledger from Skillet. There's plenty of bands out there that have great instrumentalists as well. And my whole idea with this is eventually have a festival dedicated to celebrating these incredible women and for what they've done to help grow the rock and metal scene. I've been a fan of this music my whole life, and as you can see behind me, I'm a huge Evanescence fan. I have this right over my shoulder here. I also have some other posters in the back. Hailstorm, Deadlands, a smaller group, and then The Warning back there. But I'm fans of so many different groups out there, and I want to talk about all of them. You could tell I'm wearing a Ginger shirt right here. I'm actually going to their concert in a little over a week. So, yeah, my goal is basically, talk to try to help build a sub community together, help grow the rock and metal community. And I think that there's a way to do that in a super healthy way. And I think celebrating what these artists and these groups do is a great way of going about that. So, a little bit about myself. Obviously, I've spoken about my love for music. This isn't the only thing I do. I'm going to be putting out a podcast each week. For any of you that have already followed the at Valkyrie Fest account on Instagram, or at ValkFest on X, you'll know that I'm also running that right now. So I'm going to be posting a lot on there. I'll be posting clips from this podcast. I'll be posting some blind rankings. I'll be posting a lot of different things on there to try to help engage people, and kind of shout out some of the these incredible musicians, and especially artists that don't have the spotlight as much as others out there, and try to kind of get more people to engage and listen to them, kind of learn about them in a way. So that's what I want this podcast to be all about. Just to go over what we're going to be talking about today, we have an article that was written by Isabella Ambrosio on Metal Injection that'll be a really good start to kind of kicking things off and talking about this and how we talk about this in the right way, in terms of rock, metalcore, and how we define female fronted metal, and the right way of going about saying that. But we're also going to be doing an album review. It's been, by the time this podcast comes out, I believe it'll be about 4 weeks since Sanctuary came out from Evanescence. They are one of, if not my favorite group ever, and I'll be talking about that album, going through each song there. I'll also be going over a band of the week. We're going to do a segment on the show. We're going to highlight a band that, as I mentioned earlier, is a little bit smaller, that might not have the notoriety of some others, and kind of, get people to kind of learn about that. And then we'll also be talking about a really incredible young singer that I actually happened to see on a recent trip, that did the national anthem, and the potential of her to potentially get involved with metal if she wants to, and just the celebrating really just the great voice that she has. Her name's Cheyenne Morris, 11-year-old kid. It's incredible. And we'll be talking about a lot of other things today. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get things going here. And I want to start by just talking about uh, you know some bands I think that could be a part of the first ever Valkyrie Festival. That's what I like to call it. I think I want it to be more about, empowerment, woman empowerment. I think that there's a lot that has to do with that kind of, the warrior vibes of everything. Um, Obviously, there are things with this festival that I do intend on changing over time. I'm about a month into really looking over everything, and I've already looked into potential cost of this. I go to multiple rock and metal festivals, so I know a little bit already. And I've looked into the cost of what it would be for really a lot of things out there. I mean, we're talking something that's going to be millions of dollars. So my dream with this is eventually that this could be something that could be pitched out to a bigger promoter like Danny Wimmer Presents or somebody else like that, that could make this a thing. And I have multiple cities in mind. So basically, I was trying to think what would be the best way to get things started because I live in Northern California, and a lot of people who are in the rock and metal scene know about Aftershock, which comes to Sacramento every year. And they're at a bigger venue now. They used to be at a little bit of a smaller venue, and they actually started, I believe, in 2011, if I'm not mistaken, as a one-day festival. And then over time, they've grown from, one day, a couple stages, 2 days, 3 days, and now they're at 4 days. And I believe it was last year. I think they had 5 stages. I think they're going back to four this year. But you could just see year over year, as more bands, kind of get out there, and as more people learn about them, and as more people learn about these festivals, the more people are coming and wanting to be a part of it. Whether that's, somebody who listens to, rock, metal, metalcore, and, heavy music genres every day, or whether it's just, your typical person off the street that likes one or two bands. Regardless, it's cool that, it's being celebrated in that way. But obviously, if you're starting something new, you can't go crazy like that, especially if you're going off of a kind of a sub community or sub genre, if you will, of the bigger picture, which is all of rock and metal. And you're doing basically all females, in bands. So that would mean it's going to have to start a little bit smaller, but I do think that there's a lot of people that love this music, and I think that you would get people that would travel. And I don't want to get into all of this right now because I don't want to give too much of everything away. But this is something I think that could start as a 2 day festival. I really do. And so I I have some bands that I wrote down. Actually, made a couple of graphics on some times. And I want to be clear about something too before I really get into this and before I start talking about everything that I'm doing with my Instagram page, what I'm doing with this podcast. I even mentioned this past week, I want to hire someone on as a graphic designer. I'm not the best graphic designer. I do some stuff with journalism, and I've kind of learned a little bit in Canva, but I'm not perfect. And so just to help me kind of get things going and try to have some provocative graphics, I have used some forms of AI to help make it and generate it. I know that that is a very sensitive issue for a lot of people out there. I want to make it clear that is not something I want to do in the long term. This is something I'm simply doing to try to kind of help get at least something out there that could then be kind of morphed into something even bigger and better by somebody that I would like to have, help me out with this project. With that being said, though, I have a couple graphics that I've made. And so these are some bands, for example, that I have on my list. I'll go through them all for the 2 day festival. The Pretty Wild, and we're going to be talking about a lot of these bands in future episodes as well. Some really good bands all across this list, and then it'll kind of work up to people that are definitely more well known. Roman Candle, Capra, Deadlands, As Everything Unfolds, Honey Revenge, Conquer Divide, Mothica, Crypta, Terminal Sleep, Dying Wish, Face Yourself, Employed to Serve, Lacuna Coil, Hailstorm, The Warning, Ginger, Evanescence, and Evanescence would be the headliner for that first night, and Hailstorm would be kind of a sub headliner on another stage. I think that'd be really cool. You'll notice when I talk about some of this, I'm not going super balls to the wall in terms of, having like Linkin Park with Emily Armstrong on there or having Paramore with Hayley Williams. There's a lot more money that gets thrown out even when it comes to that. And obviously, if this is something that's just starting up, you can't have everything right away. Again, this is something though that I think can grow. So, those are examples for some bands I have for the first day, and then for the second day, I'll go through other ones I have. The Haunt, Red Hook. Actually got a chance to see them recently. They're a great band. I believe out of Australia, if I'm not mistaken. See You Space Cowboy, Against the Current, Flyleaf, yours truly, Brutus. Icon for Hire, Stand Atlantic, Garbage, Within Temptation, Amaranth, New Year's Day, Delane, Battle Beast, Baby Metal, Butcher Babies, Unleash the Archers. Sub-headliner would be Pretty Reckless, and then the headliner would be Nightwish. I'd love to get them out there. That'd be fantastic. I'm going to get a chance to see actually a few of these bands this summer. I'm going to see Ginger, as I mentioned earlier, in about a week. They're playing with Entheos and I believe another group. And then I'm going to try to get out to see Evanescence, Spirit Box. That's another one I don't have on here for the first year. Again, there's a lot of bands I have on a separate document that I would want to put in for a future year. But Spirit Box and then Nova Twins, I want to go see that concert. And then ideally, I want to go see Pretty Reckless open for AC/DC. That'd be really cool this summer. But those are ideas I have for bands that would play at this festival. I have a lot of others written down on a separate document for year two. So if you're a band that's watching this podcast, or if you're a fan of a band that was not called out that's watching this podcast, they're probably listed on that document that would be there for year two. But feel free to let me know because the reason I wanted to go over this on my first podcast is I want to get your guys' engagement. I don't want this to all be created by me. The whole reason I'm doing this podcast is to get ideas from people like you guys to say, hey, this band is kicking ass. They're doing great stuff. You should learn about them. You should go listen to them. I'll do that. That's what this is all about. I want to celebrate all of that. Or, hey, you're sleeping on this group. It's a great conversation to have. And that's why I also started the Instagram page so we could have those conversations on there too. So don't hesitate to comment down below on YouTube. Send me a DM on Instagram. I would love any and all engagement that you could give out there for sure. All right, so this is an article from Metal Injection. It was written on March 12th by Isabella Ambrosio. And the title is Using Female Fronted Now as a Genre is Just as Lazy as It Was 30 Years Ago. I apologize, by the way, I'm not able to put this on the screen. I'm having some connection issues on my laptop. But just follow along with me here. And feel free if you want to pull up the article as well and read along as I go along with it here, excuse me. So here we go. Just out of curiosity, does Courtney LaPlante of Spirit Box sound in any way similar to, say, Kia Castillo or Janelle Monique Duarte, formerly of Conquer Divide? Do Lizzie Hale of Hailstorm and Fernanda Lira of Crypta share some common characteristic that defines what they sound like? Or are all the bands just lumped together because of their gender? Do Baby Metal and Ginger belong in the same female-fronted genre when that description does absolutely nothing to describe what any of these artists sound like? Do female vocalists carry more weight than, say, female guitarists, bassists, drummers, songwriters, producers, or engineers? Kawaii metal, progressive metalcore, melodic death metal, deathcore, symphonic doom metal, those are genres that actually define what an artist sounds like. So I'm going to try my best not to cuss on this podcast, by the way, because I would like this to at least be somewhat viewed by people out there that are teenagers and kids, that it's not, shown over 18. I know that a lot of people don't care, but still I do. So I'm going to try to not cuss on this show. So I'll say, so effing what? It's a female fronted band. Tell me what their music sounds like. We don't say male fronted or male vocalists. So if we're talking about equality here, in its true theory, gender shouldn't be mentioned. It's not a factor in how a band sounds. Courtney LaPlante, Danny Villarreal Velez of The Warning, Fernanda Lira, and Christina Scabia of Lacuna Coil and their vocals don't have a whole lot in common except for the fact they fall in woman's normal range, but that's about it. Zines like Sonic Cathedral trace the roots of not only the word female fronted, but metal's own variation, femme metal, all the way back to the 50s with the doo-wop girl groups because, you guessed it, they're all trailblazing women. But femme metal became used to not only describe but lazily market symphonic doom metal bands like Nightwish or Within Temptation that started emerging in the late 90s and early 2000s. The actual description of the technicalities of the all-encompassing, gloriously skin-crawling structures that any one of the femme metal produced reduced to a mere description of what society deemed to be feminine. The new genre description notably became prevalent with record labels and magazines as journalists ran with the sensationalist story angle, sectioning women off from the genre, suggesting that metal is inherently male at its default. Sensationalism and selling records obviously became far more important than the innovative nature of bands like Holy Moses, Theater of Tragedy, and Lacuna Coil, further separating them from the metal genre that they were actively contributing to. There's a lot more to the article, but I'll go ahead and stop there, and I'll just say I do think there's a lot of great points that are made here, and that's why I mentioned earlier in this podcast. I think it's important that we do celebrate and we make note of, great women who are doing great things, when it comes to, guitarists out there, when it comes to drummers. I mentioned Jen Ledger earlier, Emma Anzai of Sick Puppies, now also with Evanescence, great bassist. Nita Strauss, for example, she's kick-ass. She's done the intro for Rams games, and I don't know if she did the Super Bowl, but she did the national anthem for like Rams games. She's been with Alice Cooper. She's now doing her own thing. There's a lot of great artists out there just outside of singers that definitely should be celebrated. I totally agree with that. In Jen's case, of course, she also sings as well, and I mean she's an integral part to the band because of that. And that's the whole thing I want to get into is I think that regardless, you're going to have a lot of people when they listen to any kind of music that are going to be driven to the vocalist. If you ask most people who are general fans of bands, like, hey, who's the vocalist? They'll know, but they probably won't know who the guitarist or the drummer is. And that's the case in any band. Now, ideally, yeah, we want to celebrate everyone out there, but in society, like people don't have an encyclopedia knowledge, so you can't expect them to know every last thing. But when it comes to talking about these genres, at least more on a professional level, I totally agree that we should celebrate obviously everybody that's in the band, but we also should make note of what that music actually does sound like a little bit. But I also do think that context is important, and a good comparison I can kind of make to talking about this a little bit. As a person who's a fan of sports, as I mentioned earlier, and a fan of the WNBA, I'm a Caitlin Clark fan, but I'm also an Indiana Fever fan and a fan of the WNBA. You have some people that are only fans of Caitlin Clark and will only watch if she's playing games. Some people who are fans of the WNBA before she came in that are mad at those fans, it does make a little sense because it's taking away from what all the other women are doing. It's not her fault and it's not necessarily anybody else's fault, but there's obviously a level of animosity there, and you're definitely seeing that right now. In the sense of kind of bringing it back to metal, it's like if you only mention female fronted, or like if you're only going to a show saying, hey, I only care about one group, and then you're not going to take the time to actually listen to the other groups there, come on, put a little effort in for sure. So I think everything in context is important. So I think if, somebody's out there and genuinely does care about trying to listen to new music and just happens to say female fronted, yeah, you can say, okay, well, what does it actually sound like? And you can be reasonable. But I also think that at the same time, we can't demonize every single person. I think the important thing with music is, it's trying to bring people together first and foremost. But secondly, it is in a way a distraction from the horrible things or the awful things that go on in the world or things that we have to deal with in our everyday life. So I think the more that we can try to bring people together and not drive them apart is an important part of that. I'm not saying Isabella is doing that, by the way, and I'm not saying what this article is doing that. I think it's an important article and I think it's a good conversation to have. I just think context is important, but at the same time, people should be mindful of what they say and what they listen to out there as well. So I'll just leave it at that for now. That's a good conversation though, for sure. And again, if you have any other thoughts on that, if you disagree, if you agree, let me know in the comments. I would really appreciate that. With that being said, let's go ahead and go on now. And I hope that I don't have any other technical issues I did earlier on the show, but I'm going to try to pull up this video here of this 11-year-old kid by the name of Cheyenne Morris who did the national anthem at a College World Series game. I actually went to Omaha a couple weeks ago with a friend of mine to go to watch some baseball games for College World Series. And I heard this kid who was 11 years old, and the voice she had, I was blown away. I mean, it was one of the best anthems I've heard in probably years. I mean, at least a year. I mean, it's one of the best ones I've heard. And I know that this girl's also done some national anthems for like the New York Yankees, some teams down in Florida. But the reason I'm showing this, as you will see, is for a reason. So let me go ahead and pull this up here and share my screen with everybody. All right, here we go. Right here. And she got a huge applause, by the way, after that, and it was well deserved. But the reason I bring that up is, first of all, listen, anybody out there who's also a fan of just general pop music, country music, or whatever, I apologize, but we can't let this girl do that. She has too good of a voice, too good of a range. I would love to see her. You could tell, like at the end of the song, and when she's saying banner, like she's got a scream in there, and she's only 11 years old. She's only gonna probably grow with her voice and learn more. Like it's incredible. Like that's just great stuff. And so anybody hasn't checked it out, you can check out Cheyenne Morris Music on YouTube. Incredible voice out there, and hopefully someday she's starting up a band or doing something with rock and metal because she's too good for those other genres. No, we don't want to demonize that here, okay? I don't want to shame any of that, but no, please, go to be a rock or metal screamer or vocalist. That'd be great. So I had to talk about that. With that being said, let's go ahead and move on here and talk about the incredible new album that was put out by Evanescence, Sanctuary. This is the first album that they've put out since The Bitter Truth in 2021. They have a couple, well, really one main new addition. I mentioned Emma Anzai. She joined the band, I want to say, during the last tour in 2022. So I think this is the first full album the band has had with her as their bassist. Will McCord's, who is actually from the area that I live at. He's been a long time with the band since I think 2006. Will Hunt, their drummer, who was kick ass on this album, by the way. And I'll explain that a little bit more and how his drums really made this album even better. But he's been with the band now for a little bit, at least the last couple albums. No, I mean this is just this was a masterpiece. And I'll get into my thoughts on each song here too. But this is honestly my second favorite Evanescence album ever. And this is coming from a person who's a huge fan of their early stuff. I loved Open Door. But the reason I can't put it above Fallen is just because like that it had such an impact on me growing up, and it still remains like a top 5 favorite album in general of mine ever to this day. it's I just don't think there's a chance that's going to get beat because of the nostalgia factor of it too. But this is right up there. I mean, this is a 9 out of 10 album. It's you could definitely tell. The drums and the bass are definitely more involved throughout the album. It's heavier. It's just a great album in general. Now before I go through each song, I do want to mention like the way I listen to stuff. I usually will give it one listen through just to kind of get a sense of my thoughts on the music and just the sound of the vocals, and then I'll get usually give it a second listen through and actually try to hear what's being said with the lyrics. Look up the lyrics and then kind of try to infer from there what that means. Of course, this is my interpretation of it. It's not necessarily what the song's about. There are a couple songs that I was curious about and looked into a little bit, and I learned a couple things. But most of this is just my general thoughts, and then giving it a second listen, my interpretation of what is being said with the album. And as I'll get into, it's I think a lot about society. There's a lot of heavy political parts to this as well. So let's talk about this. Let's go ahead and start off with the first track on this album, "Beautiful Lie." The first thing I noticed listening to this song was immediately, okay, this guitar is definitely louder. It's more heavy than other albums before, as I mentioned, and the consistent riff of the whole song just definitely signals more of an angry vibe already with the album. And then the other thing I gotta mention is, Amy's voice never ceases to amaze me. Amy Lee is one of my favorite, if not my favorite singer in general. She's definitely my favorite female clean singer in general. And just hearing her voice is just so refreshing to hear. And I know that this is an album that she's super proud of with the writing of everything with the lyrics and what they mean, but also just musically is in it too. And it's it makes sense when you just hear this first song, you can already kind of get a vibe of what this album is going to be like. Giving it a second listen, this song kind of just, I get a sense of it's kind of like toxic relationship vibes based off some of the lyrics. I know from some recent interviews that I've seen, Amy isn't afraid to get involved in some more, societal and political beliefs, frustrations that lie with that. So the theme of this could definitely be based on, misinformation from social media, how people kind of feed into that. Amy fighting back against that kind of culture. So I could definitely see that being involved here too. But great first song, love "Beautiful Lie," and then that leads into track number two. "Tell Me When You've Had Enough." Again, these are some of the heavier guitar riffs I've heard from them, maybe ever. I mean, Tim and Troy McLaughlin too, didn't mention him. My apologies, Troy, are definitely experimenting a little bit here. I know there have been some songs before like "Broken Pieces Shine," even as far back as like "Weight of the World," on "Open Door," "Going Under," on "Fallen." But I mean, this definitely gives me more heavy vibes. Kind of like guitar wise, I'd almost describe it almost a little bit like Korn, or just much heavier new metal in general, or even like some metalcore bands out there. I mean, this is really heavy guitar riffs, and it's great. Again, I think that that in general could just relate to an overall angrier vibe. As I mentioned earlier, it's also Emma Anzai's first album on bass, and having listened to limited amounts of samples of Sick Puppies before, I know they have some heavy riffs, so she could definitely be playing a major influence on the sound of the guitars too. And her and Will just complement each other really well. So I think they do a really good job. And now we get to there's a few songs on this album that I really love. I don't know if this one's my favorite. I think it depends on the day. But "Who Will You Follow" is like a 12 out of 10 banger. I mean, this song is fantastic. I love this song so much. And this album, when at first I heard the song, I'm like, okay, well, this definitely starting to make me feel like it's a massive protest just against modern day society, whether that's social media, current social political environment. This kind of just feels like an anthem to people saying how important it is to just think for yourself. Just thinking about, her songwriting and how the early days of the band, it was so much about, trauma, grief, heartbreak to now this. And I'm not saying that, she doesn't still include that or have songs about that. In fact, as we'll get into later on the album, there is a song directly about that relating back to the early days of the band. And I'm not saying also that none of that is important, because it is, but it's almost like she and the band are kind of breaking out now and saying, we have a voice and we're going to use it and we don't care what the heck you say. So I love it. I mean, I just love this in general. And the music video is also fantastic for that song too. And then "Rapture." The first thing I noticed during this song, I forget what part of it was during, but there were some backup vocals, and usually Amy does her own, but it sounded like a different voice, and I was wondering, is that Emma with backup vocals? I was like, if that is, that's awesome. I'm glad to see that the respect that she already has with the band, and to, to play that big of a role with the group already. Just one of the quotes from this song that kind of really stood out to me was I believe it was after the chorus, either the second chorus or the bridge. I'm giving back all the shame I carried for you. That's just right there. That's escaping toxicity, kind of letting go of some guilt. I think there's also a call against greed in the song. There's a part where there that said, "Bloody is the jewel, money is the god you answer to." I think in general, this it could just be about manipulation. I'm not, saying I'm not going to be manipulated, whether that's for love, money, etc. And rapture, in the sense of kind of religious speak, it could also be seen as eternal bliss and escape, if you will. So maybe kind of a coming to peace with life and not letting anything interfere with that. Great song again. This is definitely a little bit not as heavy riff wise, or not as heavy in general music wise as the first three songs on the album, but it's still a great song. I love Rapture. And then getting into Afterlife, and kind of we start so high with how heavy things are, and I mentioned this was Rapture was a little step down. Afterlife, you kind of also get more mellow vibes, at least in the beginning of the song. Again, going off the last song, maybe we're kind of vibing back to peace, coming to peace now a little bit. You still have a heavy guitar kind of overlaying everything, but the background and the underlying sound is definitely more calming. A good quote in part of this song, today I'm not afraid to die, just no fear of anything anymore, nothing left to lose mentality. And could relate to the lyrics being more about talking about modern day society, not being afraid to speak their mind, kind of going back to Who Will You Follow a little bit. Um, that can even go back to the last album, that they put out, Bitter Truth, with Use Your Voice. And again, that was 2021, so that was right after the election. So, 4 to 5 years can do a lot, especially, just seeing, regardless of, your thoughts out there, the overall division we have in our society nowadays and on social media to someone. So this definitely gives a bit of a darker vibe, definitely. And this is also, I think, one of my favorite tracks on the album. I like Who Will You Follow. There's a song later in the album that I love too, but this is a great song. So far, if you had me listen to this album, I would say like this sounds like Evanescence. This sounds like a lot, the stuff they've done before too. I know this is a song that's been out for a while. I think it's been out for almost a year now. I think it was also on some sort of Netflix show, if I'm not mistaken. I didn't even realize this song was actually going to be on the album, so it's kind of cool to hear again. Um, and then getting to the track of the album, Sanctuary. The album, of course, is Sanctuary. I just want to say first off, I really do like when bands kind of put their self-titled track in the middle of the album. Usually when it's song one or two, it can kind of make the middle of a lot of albums feel a little bit lost or less important. And the way that the Evanescence staggered this and kind of just built everything up, each song almost feels equally or more important than the last, which I think is great. The opening of the song almost gives more of a vibe that it's someone talking over a TV or radio, almost kind of feels a little like wartimey in that sense. You can hear Amy kind of undertone speaking a little bit about stuff. And I don't know exactly everything that was said. A lot of it sounds like just society in general, but the things that really it just things that really this what this tells me, this whole song is things really suck out there, but we're here together. The band community genre is a safe, secure space to be in. And I also find it funny that we talk about these song titles and vibes of the past three songs: Rapture, Afterlife, and now Sanctuary. I mentioned back with Rapture, these are all terms associated with religion. And, this band has definitely had songs early that gave people at least the vibe of being Christian rock, even though they denied that they were that. But Amy has had a spiritual growth and change over time, because this is saying that anything can be a place of refuge, whether it's something as small as music or community. It doesn't need to be a place of worship. And I'm pretty sure she used to be Christian, and I think that she's said that she's kind of divorced herself from religion a bit, but she is still very spiritual. So kind of interesting when you just factor all of that into everything too. Um, How Do I Heal? Track number seven. We have pianos on this song. We have more harmonic sounds already. Definitely a difference with the album, but again, it feels like it's kind of gone more mellow despite building up the meaning and overall vibe of coming to peace from a world torn apart. I don't. I also feel like there's a little bit here. Maybe are we talking about a loved one? I know, My Immortal, which it's probably one of the saddest songs I've ever heard. While it was written by Ben Moody, who used to be with the band, it could also be interpreted as being about Amy's sister that passed while she was younger. Same with Hello. There's a quote in here: "I'll never let you go." I actually was curious because as I was looking through the song, and I was reading about her sister a little bit. I also didn't even realize I looked up her siblings and totally forgot her brother passed away in 2018. So considering that they were probably writing the last album still when he passed away, it probably took her some time to come to terms with everything that happened, and this song could definitely be for him too. I don't know that, but you can definitely, maybe interpret that based off the vibe of it. And the thing that's really sad too is I was looking up the way he passed away, and he passed away from epilepsy. I actually have a friend who suffers from that and is fortunately in good health right now, but you know, hold your loved ones close, friends and family. Thoughts go out to her and her family for sure. The next song is which is track eight, About Us. This is a sound I haven't really heard yet on the album. It kind of builds from the jump, calms down around the pre-chorus, picks back up again. I think I think that this is the one of the easier interpretations for me. This is basically an anti-Trump ballad. This is basically calling out everything that's happened so far in Trump's presidency. Quote, "They're pounding down the door." That could be related to ICE and ICE taking kids away. It could be related to January 6th. Same with "Children Better Run." Talking about caviar iced when it comes to the ultra rich. You can even put that all the way to Epstein, Mar-a-Lago, whatever. And I mean, it literally says he doesn't give a damn about us. I mean, who else could he be here? She talks about how people view him like a god. Again, I'm gonna do my best on this podcast to not give my political thought in here because I do want this to be a space for everyone. But there will be times where I will definitely have to say some words, and all I can say so far is I'm very much enjoying this album. We'll move on to track nine, Calm Down. So some electronic elements here to start. Haven't really heard them on the album since Beautiful Lie. The drums of Will and the bass of Emma just complement each other really well here. I really appreciate this song because all songs on this album really were so intriguing and thought-provoking. I kind of was able to just sit back and chill to this one, kind of turn my brain off a little bit. So I don't really have much more than that here. I apologize, but this was kind of a nice one to just it kind of vibed with the song name, Calm Down. I kind of let my brain calm down a little bit too. We'll move on to track 10, Self-Destruct. Again, back to heavier with the drums, still some electronic sounds in the background, but definitely powerful lyrics. Are we going to die before you get enough? Hate is the drug killing us. I think it's just kind of emotional exhaustion is the theme I'm getting here and just kind of trying to do something about it. We'll move on to Forever Without You. This is definitely one I had to listen to at least probably 3 or 4 times to get a sense of, what was truly being said, what was going on with this. And the one thing that's definitely made note of, I think this is the only F-bomb, not only of the entire album, but maybe in the history of Evanescence discography. I think it's the only reason that it's probably explicit on a lot of platforms. So I don't know if I've ever heard Amy say that before. So I was like, oh, okay, definitely a little angry here for sure, or just sad. The thing that was easy that after a couple listens, that I was kind of kicked myself that I was like, okay, how did I not notice this? Early in the song, this is the last tear fallen. This is the last open door. So immediately that's referring to the first two albums in the early time with the band. I mentioned Ben Moody earlier. I know he left the band really early. I think it was either during their first tour or after tour of their first album. So I could definitely see this being about him. And then, later on in the song, it says, and though you left that night, you're still here because I'm in the fight. It's clear, she feels she did okay moving on, but still feels a certain way about, him leaving the band or what happened in that situation and maybe coming to terms. Again, I don't know fully exactly what happened with that. There's, I think, been things written that she kicked him out of the band. There's been things written that he left the band. I'm not going to get into that because it's none of my business, but still, obviously, there's some confrontation there. I was just trying to see if there were any references to Open Door Days, unless that album was tough to make, considering it was without Ben. Also, though, I don't know how many songs were still written in '03, '04, if when Ben was still with the band, that led up to Open Door in 2006. So that was a little bit confusing for me. Maybe I'm looking just too much into it. I just get a sense it's about her closure from that time in the early time with the band. Could be closure from other members maybe not being with the band anymore, like Rocky and Terry too. But again, as I mentioned earlier, shout out to Tim for still kicking ass and being here for 20 years. You're freaking awesome. Representing the 916. We'll get into the last song here. Wide Open Heart. Awesome way of closing the album, and this is also one of my favorite songs. I think Afterlife, Who Will You Follow, Wide Open Heart, depending on the day, any of those could be my favorite on this album. To me, this is just about being true to yourself and not being afraid to still live in in the world and be a good person despite of all of the horrible things that may be going on. Attack each day one at a time, if you will. You could almost say the way it starts and the overall sound during the chorus has more of a triumphant vibe to it, to where it's almost celebratory. Look how far you or we have come. Don't give up. So I think it's just a great way to end the album, and really smart that they put it here. Again, this is a 9 out of 10 album. I don't know. It's hard for me to give things 10s just in general, movies, music, whatever. A 9's almost a perfect score for me. It's just a fantastic way of fighting back against modern day society, finding peace with the world, coming to terms with the past, and putting it all into an organized, beautiful piece of artwork. I think, and like I said, I'll definitely be listening to Afterlife more. Who Will You Follow? Wide Open Heart. I think it's fantastic. This is just a almost as close to a perfect album as you can get. So that's everything with Sanctuary there. Again, I'm looking to most weeks, not necessarily every week, but most weeks I'll be doing album reviews. I already have a couple in mind for next week. I'm not sure yet. I know Pretty Reckless has a new album out, so I will be listening to that. But I may also be covering an album from a smaller band, so we'll see what happens with that. Let's go ahead and talk about band of the week. I want to highlight smaller bands on here and kind of give them a voice and shout them out. And behind me, you can see it below the hailstorm, is Deadlands. I got a chance to see them for the first time last month. They're out of Long Island, New York, fronted by Casey Carlson, CJ Airy, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, on guitar. Andrew Gaudio's been their touring drummer. I don't know if he's their official drummer now or not, but I know he's been their touring drummer. They started in 2022. They're up to right about 181,000 Spotify monthly listeners, 102,000 on YouTube Music. Casey alone has 375,000 followers on Instagram, nearly 3 times the band, but you also have to factor in what else she does. She's the touring vocalist for Nita Strauss, and her vocals and screams definitely bring the energy, and she's gotten famous in a way also because of all the covers that she's done. She's been doing covers for years. So I even told them this when I told her this, because it was cool of her that she signed autographs and took pictures with everybody where I got a chance to see them. And I told her, how much she's gotten better with cleans and screams in the 4 years they've been a band. At least, since they've put out music, I should say. Their most popular song, Kundalini with the Pretty Wild. I hope I'm pronouncing that right too. And I'll talk about the Pretty Wild more next week, likely on the show. Their most underrated song, in my opinion, Die in Paradise. That's a very good song. I know they're also working on a new album right now, which is freaking awesome. They just went on tour with Vanna from New Zealand, Red Hook from Australia, and Eyes Set to Kill. They are a great band. Give them a listen if you get the chance. They are you will not be disappointed. They do great work. I think that's pretty much going to do it for our first episode. Next week on the show will probably be another engaging question related to creating a festival and kind of growing the community, and what can be done to make this festival special if it ends up becoming a thing someday. Also want to talk about the festival Olivia Rodrigo is setting up right now. That is all woman too, so I'll have more details on that. I'll have another album review for you. Eventually, I want to get some interviews on here too. I want interviews with some great female vocalists, guitarists, drummers from bands. I would love to interview some people in metal media. I'd love to interview photographers. I think that there are a lot of great people that are contributing to helping this grow this scene, make it better. And I just hope that I can somewhat be a part of that. So I appreciate everyone for tuning in. This has been Valkyrie Sessions, episode 1. We'll be back here, same place, same time next week to talk about more great things going on in kick-ass rock and metal with females, making the scene a better place. Until then, hope everyone has a great week. Rock on. Take care. Peace out, everybody.